Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery, and you're watching Tuesday's Tip of the Week, number 101. In this week's video, I'm going to be going over how I use only one finger to execute my shots, whether I'm using a hinge release or a thumb button release. This has been a long time in the making for me to be able to put this video out and give you this information, because this was honestly a topic that I struggled with for a long time. There's a lot of information out there that talks about relaxing your index finger or relaxing your hand and doing different things like that. And when I was trying those, it was creating a bob up and down on target, or it was allowing me to creep forward, especially on a target bow that has a little bit more aggressive cam system than a hunting bow with really high let off. And being able to understand this and kind of develop it and get it to the point to where I have now has helped my shooting a ton. And I would say this is probably the single most thing that's most important to my shot, is if I can get this level of execution correct, then my consistency, my accuracy, my group sizes, and everything is so much better. So on our members video this week, I'm going to take this one step further. We're going to talk about how I create the steadiness and keep the steadiness throughout execution. If you're interested in that, there's a link and info down in the bottom of this video, I guess below it. It has some information on the two different packages that you get as a member here on the channel, what's included with them, as well as the extra content, of course. So with all that being said, guys, let's get right into it. All right, so the first couple things we're going to talk about today is our hand. I want to let you know what it looks like and feels like when we're doing this. And then we'll also go over some release adjustments, whether you have a hinge release or a thumb button release. Keep in mind, you can do this with an index finger release as well. It won't work for you with a tension style release. So if you're using like an Evolution, a Silverback, something along those lines. So this won't work with those, but it will work if you're using virtually any other release. So the first thing that we need to look at and is super important is our hand. When we're using this technique, we actually want to have a very relaxed hand. And that's honestly the key to this and making it work. Whenever we are shooting, we can't have tension in the hand, or you'll notice like on this shot, there's some shaking and some trembling going on. And that is because the hand tension is there, and you're essentially going to have to force the release to fire, whether you need rotation on a hinge or whether you need to have trigger tension build up in order to fire a thumb button release. Making sure that your hand is totally relaxed, what that will allow you to do is keep these muscles here very relaxed. And that is the key to this. If our outer parts of our hand are relaxed, then whenever we go through the actual shot execution motion, then that's going to allow us to be able to have the give that we need in our hand in order to make the release rotate, in order to build pressure on the trigger. So when you are using this with the hinge release, we'll go over that first. A lot of the times what I see with people is, especially on a hinge release, they're afraid of it firing ahead of time and they don't want it to go off mid-draw, so they're super tense with their hand. They also may have the release really deep on the hand where these knuckles are very far forward. I personally like to have where this is essentially vertical, or the knuckles here in the mid-row a little bit tilted forward depending on your hand shape. But you want it to fit right in the middle, and we want to have a flat hand when we get to anchor. Everybody's thumb position and shape's a little bit different. My thumb is pretty long compared to my index and everything here, so I can draw it with a flat hand. Not everybody can do that. So as you're drawing it back and you get to full draw, letting off that thumb button, you want your hand to just relax and melt in that to create that flat piece on the back of this hand here. This may require you to have a hinge release speed rather that's a lot slower than what you're used to. If you're used to having a really tense hand, then you may be really cranking over on that, and as you relax, you can see it starts to rotate this release. So keep that in mind. On a thumb button, a lot of the times we're going to actually go the opposite direction. What I've noticed is that with trigger tension here, when I'm doing this method, for me, the easiest way to set it up is with a very light trigger. And essentially what I like to do is be able to just barely touch my thumb and get it onto the trigger so that I have a good coverage, but the release won't fire and I don't have to then add a ton of pressure after. Adding a lot of pressure after, to me, creates some extra tension in the hand and some things going on, that I don't want. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is adjustments to the bow itself that may be needed. You may find right off the bat your loop length may be too long for you compared to what you've been using because your hand is going from a scrunch position to a relaxed and stretched out position. So that's going to elongate everything, make your hand come a little further back. So keep that in mind. You may need to go to a little bit shorter loop length. The other thing you may notice is the balance on your bars may need to change. You may need to have a little bit more weight bias on the rear bar whenever you're getting relaxed and getting back here because you're not holding a ton of extra tension back at full draw. So keep that in mind. The opposite could be true as well. I've found with people where if your loop length was too short beforehand and your shoulder wasn't able to get back and get into place, when we relax our hand, it's allowing that shoulder to get back into place. You may actually need more front weight bias on your bow because you're not fighting to hold it back anymore and it's just there, and you may see it start to float and get higher up on target when you're executing and holding on target. So keep that in mind. The other thing that you may notice is your peep height may need to change. Because our hand is not crunched up and it's relaxed a little bit, you may notice that you're anchoring a little different on the face. So you may need to also change the height of your peep as well. All right, now we get to talk about the actual release execution itself. So when we are doing this, we want to make sure that we are drawing the bow back with as soft of a hand as possible. We want our fingers to feel like they're molding and wrapping around the release as we draw the bow back. We don't want it to be so soft, obviously, that the release could slip out of our hand is overstretching, doing some weird movements with it, but we want to not have our hand tense like we're trying to make a fist. That's going to make this a lot simpler as you get to anchor and as you start your execution. The next thing I want to talk about here is what this really just looks like and what you're going to feel, essentially. So when we're setting this method up, we are actually essentially only using our index finger as the primary source of movement in the release. And whether that be rotation on a hinge, or whether that be essentially rotation on a thumb button as well, it's the same exact movement no matter what release we're going through. And what you'll notice here is I am not increasing tension on my back wall, but I am still moving and essentially pulling through my shot, but I'm letting my hand give to that added tension. So instead of my hand being rock solid in one spot, and as I pull through, my hand is dragging back and the release is coming back and all of that is increasing tension, I'm allowing my hand to let that extra tension of my elbow coming back and around, and it's just stretching my hand out. So a way that I've found that helped me was something that Jesse Broadwater said once, is to almost feel like when you're on the monkey bars and you're holding on to the monkey bars with your fingers and you're just slowly letting the weight of your body stretch your hand and your fingers out when you're hanging there. And it's essentially the same thing that we're doing with the release. I am slowly just allowing this pull to stretch my hand out, and it's stretching this index finger out. And the outer fingers, because they're engaged on the release ahead of time, rotate and rock that release around. So whether I have a 2-finger release, a 3 or a 4-finger, it doesn't matter. I'm only focusing on my index giving to this pressure and allowing it to continually just kind of slip and stretch. Doing this is not pointing the index finger and relaxing the index finger. That's not what we're after here. And it's also not taking these base knuckles on our hand and relaxing the hand and letting the hand stretch through. We're not doing that either. For me, when I found if I try to relax the index finger or point it, or if I try to let the hand open up and relax these base knuckles and let the hand move, if I do either of those, I have more of a tendency to hold stagnant on target. And as I relax those, I start seeing my sight pin drop down or bob, and I lose tension against the back wall. Instead, I am merely just allowing myself to just pull through and letting it feel that pressure on my index finger and just letting it give. And I'm not doing anything special with it. I'm not doing anything extra, which is exactly why I call this a 1-finger release execution method. I'm only concentrating on that index. It's super simple. It works really well, guys. And it's going to allow you to stay consistent with what you're seeing on your float on target and what we're seeing with our sight picture with execution. Again, guys, in the members video this week, I'm going to go over how I create that tension and maintain it through this release execution and what I'm looking for. If you want to see that and more content, the extra videos on this channel that go a little bit deeper than what we see here, then down in the description of this video, there is a link for the members section of this channel that you can check out and get some more information. Appreciate everybody for watching. I'll see you soon.